everyone. My name's Eleanor Carmelli, and I'd like to welcome you to the Google Chanukah Party here at the Google New York office on behalf of the Zagat team, Jewglers New York, and Talks at Google. So welcome, happy Hanukkah, happy holidays to everyone. Without further ado, I'm going to bring on Kelly Dobkin, who's a senior editor on the Zagat team, and she's going to take away the show and bring on our famous, well-known, and fantastically inspired chefs. So Kelly.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah, everyone. We're super excited. I am particularly excited to have two of my favorite chefs in New York participating in this Latke Cook Off. So many of you may have heard of Montreal Deli. We have Chef Eli Sussman, and we also have Chef Einat Admony from Taim, Bella Busta, and the recently opened Barbel Einat. So without further ado, we're going to have both chefs show you how to make some awesome latkes today, two very different recipes. After the demos, you guys can ask questions during and as immediately upon finishing. And then we're also going to have each latke will be available on either side. So you guys can taste them and vote on the winner. We're going to tell you more about that in a few minutes. But first, let me bring up Eli Sussman from Montreal Deli. Hey, how are you?
How's it going?
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So walk us through this recipe. This is a very creative twist on. Montreal does some pretty classic latkes in the restaurant and for catering during Hanukkah. So this recipe, Eli, is kind of inspired by a bagel. Tell me a little about.
Yeah, so Mile End is a Montreal-style Jewish delicatessen. It was started by two guys from Montreal, and there's a restaurant there called Beauty's, and they do a bagel sandwich called a Beauty. And it is, if you've ever been to Mile End, the Beauty is a bagel with lox and cream cheese and capers and tomatoes and onions. So I'm doing a Beauty latke today. So
Awesome.
It's going to be a classic latke based on my dad's recipe. Super, super simple. And then it's going to be topped with lox cream cheese, some very thinly shaved shallots, fried capers, cherry tomatoes, a little bit of chive.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I'm really excited. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's get started. What is the very first step to make?
Yeah,
these
so
latkes?
the very first step is probably the most boring step to watch, but so I'm just going to grate the potatoes. So the reason that you grate the potatoes, these have been washed, and the reason that I'm going to grate them into water is because potatoes oxidize super quickly and they turn brown. So at the restaurant, we do this in huge quantities, and we don't use a home box grater, but here, this is what I'm going to use. So
See, latkes were the first thing I learned to make, and I was always forced to hand grate them. My dad said you had to hand grate them. But do you agree? I mean, does it make a huge difference, or?
I suppose, I mean, we look at it this way at the restaurants. It's like sometimes things that take longer, you know, you put a little bit more love and care into them and they come out better. A lot of things that we do at the restaurant are the old-fashioned way,
right.
Which is kind of, we pride ourselves on doing things, reinventing and reimagining the deli classic. So a lot of the stuff that we do takes a little bit longer, and
right.
often that results in it being better.
Yeah.
So no, you don't need to hand grate them, but I figured that a lot of people don't have Cuisinarts or whatever at their apartments, so probably most of you don't even cook in your apartments.
Probably most people don't have the counter space to even get a
really
Cuisinart on
clean
their counter.
kitchens that no one has ever touched in their entire
Yeah.
lives. So yeah, at the restaurant we do. Well, right now for Hanukkah, we're doing 50-pound batches of potatoes for latkes. So we don't do those by hand. We do them in a Roboku. And
a week.
I mean, they still get formed by hand. So last night, we had two really big parties today. So we made 1,000 latkes last night for this party as well. And I mean, they're all hand formed. So it's still time consuming no matter what.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little about, you're saying this
Joel, do you want to come up and grate a little bit?
I can help too.
This is my favorite part. I get to put my boss to work. Joel's one of the owners of Mile End, and I'm going to give him the incredibly tedious task of grating the potatoes.
I'm
going to slide over.
So Joel, have you ever had to grate any latkes before?
Not since high school.
Okay. And
so
how long can you grate for is the question? Like 5 minutes, 10 minutes? What's your top?
He's already bored.
It's almost the same motion as slicing brisket, so it's
Okay.
like, it's not that far off.
Okay.
I'll be good.
So the next step is, so you're going to grate the onions as well. And what I did was, so I just took one end off, and then I made a slight slit down the side, and I'm going to peel off the outer layer.
Okay.
But what I want to do is I want to leave the nub on because you want to make sure that you leave something to hold the onion together when you're going to be grating it. If you take off both ends, the onion's going to split apart. That's ready for Joel to go grate that in a
The
couple.
water stuff also?
No, when we're done with the potatoes, that one you can hang on that for a second. So this recipe is super simple. You know, it's just really potato, onion, flour, matzo meal, egg, and a little bit of salt and pepper. And we do a lot of like zany, fun latkes. We do, you know, sweet potato latkes. We do butternut squash latkes. We do, you know, beet latkes. I like this one because as like a classic base, you know, who doesn't like fried potato? So as a pretty much a base for any type of topping, we go with the classic latke. So
is this pretty close to like what your father taught you as a kid growing up? Or?
So this is exactly my dad's recipe, just with a little bit of matzo meal thrown in. I like the matzo meal because like texturally, I think it's nice on the inside, and also, even though we're grating the potatoes into water, obviously like when you're frying something, moisture is the enemy, right? So it's, I guess, slightly counterintuitive, but so we're gonna grate all these into water and then we're gonna squeeze out all the water, which is kind of messy, but also part of the fun, I think. Like when you make latkes, you make them by hand. It's a little bit sloppy. You're trying to, you know, probably do it with your friends or with your family. And so when Joel grates all the potatoes, I'll hand squeeze all of the moisture out.
He's still going.
Almost done.
And then we'll grate the onions, squeeze out the moisture from the onions, and then mix in the dry ingredients, and then put an egg in and form them together. So I'll get this started right now.
Great. So would you say, like, what would you say are the most common when you experience a bad latke? What are kind of some of the characteristics? Are they overcooked, undercooked? Are people not squeezing out enough water before they fry them? I mean, what do you think are the...
Is there a pilot on this? There it is.
Ah.
Got it. Cool. Yeah, sorry, what was the question?
What do you think are some of the most common? I see latkes botched all the time in restaurants. You know, sometimes they're soggy, sometimes they're overcooked. I mean, what do you think are like, what's a common mistake when making latkes, do you think?
Well, we par fry ours and then refry them to order. And so, I mean, that's just something that we do with our French fries. It's something that a lot of restaurants do. And so we fry them at 250 degrees and then we refry them before they hit the table at 350 degrees. And we found that that makes them super crispy. I imagine that if you're at home, you probably don't want to double fry. It's just kind of, it's an annoying process. So you could just fry to order, you know?
Right.
I also think making them really skinny is good because the less interior, the more surface area, you're gonna get a crispier latke. But also it's really about like, just doing them in a timely manner. You don't want them to sit out very long. So I guess if you do them, you could hold them in your oven at like 200 degrees for 2 hours or something like that after you fry them. But I mean, they're obviously the best when they're made and then served right away. So.
While we're getting stuff ready, does anyone have any latke questions they want to ask Eli? Now's your chance.
Oh, or any other questions.
Or any other questions about myelin?
I'll talk about latkes all day if you really want. But so yeah, so I'm just gonna squeeze out as much moisture as I can from this.
Great. That's a super important step, is squeezing out the water, because if anyone else at home has tried to fry a potato without doing that, it just doesn't get brown.
There are other ways to guard against oxidation, but this is just like the old-fashioned way. You can do it like this and it works out fine. You can definitely, like if you're doing a huge batch, you could grate the potatoes several hours in advance and hold them in the water. They don't really deteriorate that much. So if you can't afford time to do it all in one day or whatever, you could do them the day before. For all of you people that are having huge latke parties at your apartment later today. Yeah. How do we what? How do you stage the potatoes? Put them in gigantic pools? So we do them in like 30-pound batches. So we fill, you sanitize the drop sink in the kitchen, you fill it with water, you have the potatoes sitting in there. And then those, because we actually do them so quickly, we don't grate those into water. We just alternate between onion and potato, and it goes through the Roboku, which is like an industrial cooking device, and it has a grater that spins. So we grate it into a huge, basically like a plastic bus tub, and then we mix all the ingredients into it, and then 3 guys stand in a row, and we just form them by hand, and we just throw them into the fryer and do them in batches. So it's it's not like super difficult from like a labor standpoint. It's just time consuming because you can only fry 30 at a time, and they take a couple minutes to fry every single time. So, yeah, you can turn it down a little bit. Yeah,
Getting a little smoky.
You can turn it all the way off, actually. Like.
More question?
I mean, you guys are gonna figure that out. How
I
long
think
do
I
you
can eat
it-
1,000 myself,
Yeah.
so that's very relative.
I mean, it went to like a bunch of different events today because, I mean, we're well known as a Jewish restaurant. So on Pesach and, you know, and all Jewish holidays, we kind of get hammered by everybody looking for us to cater because in New York, most people don't really cook themselves, unfortunately. So we end up doing, I mean, yeah, we do a lot of latkes on,
A lot of latkes. We're like
a lot of donuts.
a lot of sufganiyot.
Yeah. And then, you know, we do a lot of braised brisket, obviously, and like the classics. A lot of poutine, you know. So,
And the next step is we're going to mix the dry ingredients, right?
yeah, we're gonna mix the dry ingredients, and then here is my pitcher of that. That should be enough oil.
Yeah. Enough for 8 nights.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we so it was great. It was like very ironic. Our fryer died yesterday, so at our Brooklyn location. So on the first day of Hanukkah, we had nowhere to fry anything. So we were doing
boy.
latkes in like this little baby fryer off to the side. So luckily we were able to get another fryer in there, but it was
It was a Hanukkah miracle.
yeah,
It
exactly.
In the middle of lunch service, it took us about 45 minutes, which is actually no time at all, to pull out the old fryer and put in the new one. It was
Pretty
an
much
adventure.
the worst possible timing.
Yeah.
So
So how do you know like how much, I mean,
Yeah, I knew you were gonna ask that.
Yeah.
You were like, "How did you know what to put in?" I'm just gonna do it by feel, honestly,
Okay.
which is
you don't want it too wet, don't want it too dry.
I printed out recipes, and you guys should definitely follow that. But you know, so what I'm looking for is like a sort of a tacky consistency. What I like to say is like you can put an imprint in the latkes and it doesn't come back up, right? So if the
Right.
latkes were wet, if you pushed into it, they would just kind of spread. But what I'm looking for is the latke to be able to hold into a shape. So if I form it into a ball, like the size of a golf ball, and then I press it all together, I want it to have a sort of tackiness so that it holds, right? So it's like almost there. I can feel that it's pretty much there. I'm just gonna mix it up a little bit more. Joel, can you hit me with a little bit of salt and pepper, please? Here.
I love how Joel's the sous chef. Too.
I know, right? Cool.
Do you need me to put any oil in?
Yeah,
Should I
can
get it
you
going?
can you get a little oil going for me?
This is a team effort, guys. Okay.
And as you can see, it's like there's no real clean way to make latkes with your hands, you know? So,
Yeah.
you got it?
Yeah.
So when my dad makes latkes at the house, so you know they have just like a normal home kitchen. Yeah, give me like about 1.5 inches. So yeah, that's great. So you don't want I don't like to totally submerge the latkes when I cook them at home. So just a good rule of thumb with anything is like if you're frying, it's obviously super dangerous to be frying at your house. So you want to be really careful that you're paying close attention to the oil. And also my dad likes to line the floor with newspaper because there's a lot of splattering and like it gets super slippery and stuff. And you want to use a fish spatula because when you're transferring with all the oil and stuff, you don't want to be spilling it. So don't use a regular spatula or a spoon or something. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So while we're starting to fry up over here, I'm going to get started with Einat as well. So Einat, hi. Einat is the chef and owner of Taim, Balabusta, and Barbel Einat. So Einat, we're going to do a little bit of a twist on a traditional latke using a bunch of different vegetables. Tell me a little about your recipe.
All right, so basically this latke is made out of potatoes, sweet potato, carrot, onion, and then I put some Granny Smith apples inside again, mostly because I personally don't like the applesauce with latke. I never got the point of it. So I said, you know what, this is going to go in, and it's actually make it really nice. It gives some tiny tanginess inside. Very similar to Eli. We squeeze everything. The carrot don't have enough. They don't have enough moisture, so we don't need to do that. But the potato and the onion, I also add thyme and rosemary a little bit.
Oh yeah, that sounds really good.
We're going to serve it today with preserved lemon yogurt and micro cilantro.
Wow, that sounds great.
Huh? You got lost?
It's not over yet. So, Chef, I know. So
No.
you grew up in Israel, and I'm always curious. Like, were latkes different there? Were they the same?
To be honest, I didn't grow up on latke.
Okay.
I know.
So for Hanukkah,
So-
did you guys have them or not at all?
A different one. Latke is a very Ashkenazi dish that I used to eat on my next door neighbor. My mom do different things. She do like mostly sweet stuff. Like we do sufganiyot from scratch, which is the Israeli donuts, if you don't know. And she doing other stuff. She do all like funnel cake. Latke I started doing when I came to New York like 16 years ago. And I love it.
Wow.
It's like Rashti, which I used to work at Denu back then, and they have Rashti, and I'm like, ah. So it's very similar for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've never had a latke I don't like, so this is...
Really?
Yeah. Well, I've had some bad latkes. I know everyone else probably has too.
No,
But the general idea of a latke,
the only problem that the latke, it's like, you know, I have a falafel shop. I always upset when people order to go, and they always do, but it's not as...
It's not meant to.
It's not.
No.
It's, you have to eat it the minute it's come out of the fryer. Latke,
Yeah.
same thing. All the crispiness, all the, like, you know, the texture, it's need to be eaten on a spot. So...
Yeah. So we're just getting the burner going. We're mixing all of the grated ingredients together once we squeeze the water out. Does anyone have any questions for Einat while we're here? No?
Nothing?
Yeah.
All right.
Goes in your falafel. It's so good.
Chickpea, onion, garlic, cumin, coriander, black pepper, and salt.
There's
I
gotta
cover
be
it
a
all.
secret ingredient, though,
And
that
there
you're
is
not telling.
recipe in my cookbook, so yeah.
Yeah. Einat was actually on Bobby Flay Throwdown. I don't know if you guys saw that a couple years ago, making
Yeah.
falafel.
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Feels like yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, he won, but then he reversed the judges'
Decision.
Exactly. He came after a month and he said, you know what? They don't know what they're talking about, which I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey,
Check. Oh.
just wanted to announce if anybody has any questions, we're going to finish up the cooking demo in just a few minutes and let all of you eat the delicious things that you're watching them make. So if you have any questions at this point,
Over here.
they are all fresh, I promise. If you have any questions, just raise your hand and I'll walk around with the mic.
Right there. Guys?
Wow. Good question.
Free?
Yeah.
Back here, just one moment.
Maybe you'll get one for Hanukkah.
Yeah.
You never know.
No.
Talk to Google. Maybe they'll.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious each of the chefs, what are your favorite condiments for latkes? Or what do you consider acceptable condiments for latkes?
Not applesauce.
Yeah, I honestly didn't like applesauce growing up either, and I don't really like sour cream. I have the most sacrilegious. I like to eat them like they're hash browns. I like to dip them in ketchup. So
Ketchup?
sorry, I'm.
Good, actually.
You know, when I'm from the suburbs, you know, I'm from
fun.
Detroit,
It's
and
fun.
like they're basically Jewish hash browns. So I mean, but for when it comes to like actual true toppings, like I'm not really a sweet guy ever. You know, I
You're
like
not?
savory
You look
stuff.
very sweet.
Oh, thank you.
All right, we have a question over here.
Neither one of you mentioned what kind of oil you like to use and what kind of oil you don't like to use.
Not olive oil,
Yeah,
not blend oil. Canola will be the best for me.
yeah, same.
So in the frying process, like, at what point? I never really, I've never really figured this out. How do you know when a latke is done? Just by looking at it?
Well, the great thing about a latke is there's a lot of margin for error because
Yeah.
it's fried potato and pretty much it's going to be good no matter what, as long as you put salt on it.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm looking for a deep golden brown. So you could say the thinness that I made them, it's like maybe 3 minutes each side, depending on how hot your oil is. But I'll just hold one up right now.
Okay. That looks
So you
very
guys can
pretty.
see. So that's what I'm looking for in terms of brownness. And then I'm just going to do the other side to the same level, and then I'm going to put salt on them.
Okay.
We're going to take 2 more questions from the audience, and then we'll ask our chefs to stand by their latkes and
Cool.
and start serving. So one more question over here.
Because they're all the way over there.
Do your recipes change from year to year, or are they constant over time?
Do the recipes change?
Change from year to year, or do you use the same one year?
The latke recipe hasn't really changed. I mean, it's, yeah.
Oh.
Right.
Okay, and we have our final audience question over here.
Hey, I was actually wondering who won when you went up against Bobby Flay.
Where is that?
Oh.
Hi. Sure. Yeah, what's the question?
When you were in Throwdown with Bobby Flay, who won the competition?
Oh, so I just say somebody asked that, but Bobby Flay won, but it was very upsetting moment. No, he changed the thing that the guy. No. His falafel wasn't as good, but the judges wasn't as good as well. They really didn't know anything about Middle Eastern food. They said that my food was Soho chic and he's looking like traditional, which was very funny. But a month after, Bobby Flay came to Taim, the small Taim in a village, with all his crew, and he changed the decision of the judges. So that was a really nice and genuine thing to do.
She won.
Everybody thinks I won, but it's not true, and I'm an honest person. No, I didn't, but...
Well, she's here today and Bobby Flay's not, so
What does
thank
that
you.
say? Yeah.
My latkes are done.
Great. All right.
So
Okay, do we want any final comments from the chefs? Any
Hola.
more advice for the audience? Thoughts for the holiday?
yeah, I mean,
Do's and don'ts in your kitchen at home?
do's and don'ts for the entire kitchen. No, I mean, I hope everyone has a really nice Hanukkah. I hope you enjoy the latkes. The latkes that you're having are just like these, but obviously they were fried a little bit ago. So you won't be getting the exact same fresh out of the oil crispiness, but I really hope you enjoy them. And we're over here and she's over there. So please come and we'd love to start feeding you guys now.
Yes, and once you guys taste the latkes, there's going to be a voting system Eleanor is going to explain, but it's pretty simple. It just goes on back there. Yeah, so we're going to get the latkes rolling out. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Round of applause.